Hi, my name's Damaris and my mom kicked me out because I wouldn't buy my sister a luxury car with my money. Instead, I spent it on an abandoned farmhouse. No plumbing, no roof, just dust, silence, and maybe something else, something they'd worked hard to bury. They called me unstable, filed to take my rights. Even got my ex to go public, calling me delusional on air. But here's the thing, if I was really the problem, why were they so afraid of me having a voice? You ever been erased by your own family? The moment I pulled up to Seraphine's party, I knew I'd made a mistake. Her house no mansion was lit up like a luxury dealership launch party. Champagne flutes clinked, laughter spilled out from the patio, and a valet opened my car door like I was someone important. Except I wasn't. Not here. I stepped inside, brushing my hand over the neckline of the blue wrap dress I'd spent too much time debating over. It wasn't flashy, but it was me. I'd told myself I was attending to support my sister. That's what family does, right? But something in my gut said I'd walked straight into a trap, and I hadn't even taken off my coat yet. Damaris! My mother's voice hit like a bell chime dipped in vinegar. I'm so glad you came. You didn't forget Seraphine's gift, did you? I froze. Gift? She blinked like I'd just admitted to walking in barefoot. The car, darling, the one we talked about. I looked at her squarely. No, Mother. I never agreed to buy her a car. Her lips curled. You sold that property for $1 million. It's only fair you share the blessing. It's her 30th birthday. And she's done so much for this family. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't roll my eyes. I just said, I have plans for that money. Personal ones. She blinked at me again, like I'd spoken a foreign language. Then she turned her back and walked toward a group near the bar. My pulse thumped in my ears, but I stayed composed, until I overheard her say, loud enough for everyone near her to hear, "It's a shame when some people forget where they came from." The music felt louder after that. People eyed me differently, sideways glances, half smiles that didn't reach their eyes. I stood awkwardly near the appetizer table, unsure where to go, unsure why I'd come. And then Seraphine took the mic. She wore red like it was stitched into her skin. Perfect makeup, hair swept up like she was ready to model for a billboard. I remembered when we used to play salon in our grandmother's basement, cutting paper dolls' hair and pretending we were the rich ones. Now she was living it. I just want to thank everyone for being here, she beamed. Especially my family, those who continue to support me emotionally, financially, and otherwise. The crowd clapped. I didn't, she continued. And to those who choose to keep their blessings to themselves, I guess we'll just let karma do the math. A few guests chuckled. One man behind me murmured, Yikes. I felt my face burn. And by the way, Seraphine added, raising her glass, some people think buying a car for your sister is a burden. I think it's a privilege. But hey, what do I know? I just work hard and show up. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Not once did she say my name, but every word landed like a slap. And Mother? She smiled, sipped her drink, and let it happen. No one stopped her. No one said a word. The shame didn't come in waves. It was a silent flood. I walked out before dessert, slipped out the side gate while everyone posed for photos beside a rented Lamborghini with Happy Birthday Seraphine decals on the hood. I didn't cry until I was halfway home. By then, the tears came not out of sadness, but fury. I parked outside my apartment, sat in silence. The headlights of passing cars swept across the dash, then faded. I reached for my phone just as it buzzed. A voicemail. From Mother. Damaris. That was childish. You embarrassed everyone. If you're going to act like this, maybe it's best you stay away until you remember how to be part of this family. I deleted it. I didn't listen to it again. I didn't cry. I went inside, hung up my coat, and kicked off my heels. Then I opened my laptop. The same listing I'd saved weeks ago blinked back at me. 4. Bed, 2-bath farmhouse, uninhabitable, no running water 94s, 000. I stared at it like a lifeline. This house didn't ask anything from me. It didn't judge. It didn't need me to prove my worth. I moved the cursor over the button, place bid, and I clicked it. Not for revenge, not to prove a point, but because I needed a beginning that was mine. I didn't sleep much. After placing the bid, I shut the laptop and lay there in the guest room wide-eyed, staring at the ceiling fan slowly circling above me like it was mocking my thoughts. The room used to smell like lemon and lavender when Grandma visited. Now it smelled like fabric softener and resentment. I heard movement downstairs, early cupboards slamming, laughter that didn't include me. I stayed in bed longer than I should have, hoping maybe someone would knock, maybe offer coffee or a simple good morning. But it never came. When I finally walked down, my suitcase was already at the foot of the stairs. Seraphine was the one who noticed me first. She stood beside it like a model beside a prize on a game show. "Didn't think you'd still be here," she said without turning her head. "Mom says it's time." "Time for what?" I asked, even though I already knew. "To go," she said, arms crossed. "You've disrespected this family enough." I looked over to the dining room. My mother sat at the head of the table with a half-eaten grapefruit in front of her, calmly reading a lifestyle magazine. She didn't even glance up. "Mom?" I said, my voice steady, not pleading. She turned a page. "You made your choices. This isn't your home anymore." There was no argument, no yelling, no apology, just the sound of Seraphine dragging my suitcase to the front door like it had always belonged on the curb. Outside, the sun was already blinding. I stepped into it and blinked. Seraphine followed, phone in hand, already recording. Finally reclaiming my peace, she narrated like some TikTok therapist. I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. I simply reached for my keys, picked up my laptop bag, and walked to my car. As I opened the door, I looked back one last time. Mom stood in the doorway, arms folded across her chest, not saying a word. Not even goodbye. I pulled away from the curb slowly, making sure the trunk didn't swing open and embarrass me further. I didn't have anywhere to go. My apartment lease had ended 2 months ago, when I thought moving back temporarily would help mend things. I drove with no direction, just motion. Roads blurred. I turned up the air conditioning, even though I was cold. Somewhere near the edge of town, I pulled into the lot behind a diner I used to go to in college. It was empty this early. No one would bother me here. I sat there a while, then reached into my wallet, not really sure why. That's when I found it tucked behind an old gift card, folded so tightly it was nearly part of the leather. A note, Grandma's handwriting, faded but familiar. "When the world erases you, find your place again, brick by brick." I broke. Not the loud, ugly kind of crying, just slow, hot tears that rolled down without needing permission. Not because I lost a home, but because I finally admitted I never really had one to begin with. When the tears stopped, I wiped my face and took a breath so deep it shook my shoulders. I opened my laptop just to see if the bid had processed. It had. Still pending, but mine. The listing was plain. Cedar Creek Farmhouse, 4-bed, 2-bath, needs work, like me. I checked my bank account. $950,000 left. I transferred it into escrow, closed the browser, and whispered into the stillness of the car. Let's see if I can build something no one else can take. Because maybe starting over doesn't mean forgetting what they did to you. Maybe it means proving they never had the power to stop you in the first place. 2 days later, I was pulling into Cedar Creek, just as the early evening light stretched over the narrow roads, like old ribbon unraveling from a forgotten gift. The farmhouse sat at the end of a gravel path, half swallowed by unkempt grass and vines. The air smelled like rust and dry leaves, and the mailbox hung crooked with no name, only a peeling number. 802. As I stepped out of the car, gravel crunched beneath my boots, the kind of sound you feel in your knees. The house was worse than the listing hinted. One of the front shutters dangled loose, swaying slightly, even without wind. The yard looked like raccoons held a bachelor party here last spring and never left. A man walking his dog on the other side of the road paused just long enough to mutter, "Waste of money," before tugging his leash and continuing on like he hadn't said anything at all. I stood there, staring at the sagging porch and cracked windows. It didn't welcome me, but it didn't push me away either. Inside, it was cold. Not winter cold, but the kind of chill that settles when a place hasn't been touched in years. Dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts, catching what little light slipped through the broken blinds. I unrolled the sleeping bag I'd packed and set it in the center of what might have once been the living room. The floor creaked beneath my weight like it wasn't sure it could hold the memories I'd brought with me. There was no electricity yet, no signal, just the dim light from my flashlight and the sound of squirrels skittering inside the attic. I wasn't scared. I was used to feeling alone in rooms full of people. I could survive silence just fine. I spent the next morning with work gloves and a broom, clearing trash from the corners, plastic wrappers, torn-up insulation, old beer cans. Behind a loose board in the floor near the fireplace, something shiny caught my eye. An iron key. Heavy. Cold. Not a house key, it had an antique curve, almost ornamental. I searched the house for a matching lock, and hours later, found it in the basement wedged into the rusted clasp of a trunk tucked behind the furnace. It creaked open with resistance, the hinges groaning like they hadn't moved in decades. Inside were yellowed papers bundled with string, receipts, scribbled notes, and near the bottom an old map, folded, faded. On the back were the initials DM in my grandmother's handwriting, Dolores May. She used to call me her sharp-eyed girl, said I saw things others missed. When I was 9, I'd cried over a crushed tin brooch at a garage sale. Everyone else had passed it over. She bought it for a quarter, polished it, and wore it to church like it was worth diamonds. "Everyone else sees trash," she once whispered while I brushed her hair. You'll know when it's treasure." I pressed the map to my chest like it could still carry her warmth. That night, I sat by candlelight at the old kitchen counter, the papers spread before me. Most were legal documents, old land transfers, correspondence between banks, and some family names I didn't recognize. Then I saw a sealed envelope with my name written in blue ink. Damaris. No return address, no date, just the words, "In case they ever send you away." Hands trembling, I opened it. It wasn't long, just a few lines. They'll pretend the land holds nothing. But they're only pretending because they know what's buried here, what they tried to erase. You're the last one who can reclaim it. Be careful who you trust. Not everyone who shares your name shares your truth. I reread it twice. A third time, slower. Then I looked at the map again. She'd marked something just beyond the tree line on the west side of the house. Suddenly, the moldy wallpaper and warped floorboards didn't seem so empty. This house wasn't just some crumbling mess I'd overpaid for. It was holding secretures, and now mine. I lit another candle and placed her letter on the mantel. A vow settled inside me. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, anchored certainty. I'll find it. All of it. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because they thought I wouldn't. Some people tear you down with words, others do it with silence. But online? They can do both loudly, and forever. The next morning I slipped into the only diner in Cedar Creek with public Wi-Fi, ordered a lukewarm coffee I didn't plan on drinking, and sat by the window with my back to the room. The place smelled like old toast and lemon-scented mop water, and the booths had that stickiness no cleaning ever seemed to fix. Still, it was quiet, and I needed quiet. I opened my laptop expecting junk emails and maybe a shipping update for the flashlight I ordered. Instead, my screen filled with notifications, alerts, and pings. My name, over and over again, attached to phrases that punched harder than any fist ever could. Unstable. Stay away. Delusional woman claims haunted inheritance. She snapped after being denied money. Watch the video. My hands froze over the keyboard. Someone had clipped footage from old family gatherings, birthday dinners, holidays, and spliced them together to paint a version of me I barely recognized. A version where I looked erratic, overdramatic, even dangerous. A video played on loop at the top of the thread. Me, 4 years ago, raising my voice at a Thanksgiving table context, stripped, subtitles added. "She always ruins everything," one caption read. My stomach churned. I clicked through the comments. Familiar names, unfamiliar cruelty. Didn't she get fired for mental issues? Guess money doesn't buy stability. I always thought she was a little off. A former colleague shared the post. Another, someone I once considered a friend, commented, "Not surprised, honestly. She was always a bit intense." I reached for my phone and dialed Naomi Oni, of the few people who used to check in when things got hard. Straight to voicemail. Then a text, crisp and clean. "Please don't contact me. This is scaring me." I blinked at the screen, trying to make the words mean something else, but there was no misunderstanding that. I was being erased, Not physically, but reputationally. Online where it counts more than it should. I reported the post, flagged the comments. The platform sent back a robotic. "We've reviewed your report. No violation found." Of course. I took a breath and scrolled to the original post. Posted by Bryn Bright Future. My heart sank. I clicked the profile. Private. Only a few posts. But one shared photo, a birthday party. The one I helped fund, the same cake, same tablecloth, Seraphine in the center. Bryn, my sister's middle name. Her online alias for years, back when she was building that lifestyle influencer persona. She used to joke, "Gotta protect the brand." Now she was using it to destroy mine. The waitress passed by and topped off my coffee. I didn't move. Just stared at the cup as if it might offer answers. Behind me I heard two men whispering, low and sharp. "That's the woman who bought that mold house, right?" Crazy thing to do. Yeah. Heard she's got issues. Real unstable. Shame. My throat tightened. I stood, grabbed my bag, and stepped outside into the chilly morning. Across the street, my house stood in silence, shutters hanging loose, gutters sagging. But it didn't mock me. It didn't whisper behind my back. That was more than I could say for most people. I looked up at the cracked second-floor window, then down at my phone. The comments were still rolling in, like waves determined to drown the last of my dignity. But in the middle of that storm, one thought broke through. They need me to look insane, because if anyone listens, really listens, someone else loses control, and they can't have that. I walked back to the house. The lock stuck twice before turning. Inside, the air was cold and damp, but at least it was mine. I pulled out a notebook and wrote down every username, every timestamp, every word I could trace. I didn't respond, didn't post a single thing, let them scream. I'd write history. By morning, the fog had lifted from the trees, leaving behind a wet chill that clung to the broken window frames and clattered softly in the loose panes. I moved through the house deliberately, each step quiet on warped floorboards I'd started to memorize. I made coffee on the portable burner I'd bought from a flea market, its hum the only sound in the house other than my breath. The day before had passed in silence, no new posts, no voicemails, no one reaching out to check in. But silence, I was learning, didn't always mean peace. Sometimes it was just the stillness before another crack opened wide. I'd started organizing old paperwork from the basement, most of it yellowed with age, water-stained and unreadable. But something that morning felt different. The air wasn't heavy, just alert, like the house itself was holding its breath. I pulled open the bottom drawer of the old kitchen hutch, one I hadn't touched since moving in. It resisted, sticking at the back. I tugged a little harder, and something dislodged beneath it. A soft clunk. I crouched down and slid my fingers underneath. There it was, an envelope, sealed, taped to the underside of the drawer panel. It was brittle at the corners, but I could still make out her handwriting. To Damaris. "If they don't give this to you, find it yourself." The date, almost 10 years ago. I didn't open it right away. I sat there, knees to my chest, holding that envelope like it might vanish if I blinked. Then I took it to the living room, lit a candle, and peeled the flap open with my thumb. The letter was long. She'd written about watching me grow up, about how I always asked why before doing what I was told. She said that made me harder to raise, but impossible not to love. She mentioned the property. Said she'd left instructions for it to be transferred quietly to my name in the event you are pushed out or forced away from your rightful place. She had known. There was a second page, a legal form notarized, a secondary deed, signed and dated. It confirmed what she'd written. The house wasn't just mine because I'd bought it. It had been mine for years. I sat back and let the firelight play across the paper. They knew. They'd all known. For 10 years they'd let me float, scraping by, while a place with my name on it collected dust and rot. While I begged for their approval, their affection, their crumbs. I didn't cry. That emotion had drained out of me weeks ago, back when Seraphine raised her glass and told the world I was selfish. Now I felt something slower, firmer, like stone settling beneath my ribs. I took photos of everything, scanned every corner of the documents, uploaded it all to a private folder online. Then, for the first time since the smear campaign started, I picked up the phone. The call rang twice before Bryn answered. Wow, she said. Look who finally came to her senses. I'm not calling to argue, I said. A beat, she laughed. That's rich. You think anyone's buying the little victim act? I'm not the victim here. Not anymore. I know about the deed. And the letter. I know you both hid it. Another voice came in the unmistakable sigh of my mother. Damaris, you're confused. That paperwork was never filed properly. It was all just symbolic, nothing legal. I've already confirmed its status. It's legal, binding, and intentional. You're being dramatic, my mother said sharply. This is exactly why people think what? I cut in, keeping my voice even. That I'm unhinged? Because I won't pretend anymore? Silence on their end. I waited a moment, then added, I'm not calling to beg. I'm calling to tell you that if you keep pushing me, I will respond, but not the way you want me to. Not with shouting or chaos, with facts, with receipts. Then I hung up. The silence in the room after the call wasn't empty. It was full of the kind of energy I hadn't felt in years. Like I'd finally picked up the pen to write my own side of the story. I pinned the letter on the wall, right beside a series of scanned surveys and loan documents I'd started pulling from public records. Beneath them, I taped a small photo of the farmhouse, taken on the day I closed on the sale. I'd been standing outside, wind in my hair, not smiling, but not broken either. I stepped back and looked at the wall. It was messy, uneven, unfinished, just like me. But it was a start. They'd tried to paint me as the storm, the unstable one, but they never counted on me keeping records. I brushed my fingers over the words my grandmother had written in the margin of one document. When you're ready, let them know you were never asleep. And I whispered back, I'm awake now. The morning came with gray skies and a wind that seemed to whisper, today's the day. I wrapped a scarf around my neck, grabbed the folder I'd spent nights assembling, and drove down the 2-lane road that curved out of Cedar Creek and into the next county. The drive was quiet, almost meditative, until the downtown law office came into view, a squat brick building sandwiched between a coffee shop and a vape store. The woman at the front desk glanced up, then smiled politely when I gave my name. Attorney Merritt's expecting you, she said, handing me a clipboard. Her tone was careful, respectful, but not warm. I was used to that now. Inside the office, everything smelled of lemon polish and old paper. Merritt sat behind his desk, sleeves rolled up, glasses perched low on his nose. He looked more like a schoolteacher than a lawyer. But he took the folder, leafed through the title deed, my grandmother's letter, the loan statements, and nodded slowly. It's enough, he said. They underestimated you. I didn't smile. They always do. By 11, the paperwork was filed. Official. A civil suit for defamation, financial misconduct, and fraudulent use of identity naming both Bryn and my mother. As I walked back to my car, a gust of wind tugged at my coat. It didn't feel like victory, not yet, but it felt like movement. Later that afternoon, the other shoe dropped. My phone rang just as I was refilling my gas tank. The call was from my bank's fraud department. I held the phone between my shoulder and ear as I wiped down the windshield, half listening until the words, loan default and $72,000 sliced through my brain like a blade. What loan? I asked, steady but cold. The rep paused. There's a business line of credit, opened 3 months ago in your name, for a company called Bright Future Media, LLC. I clenched my teeth. That's not mine. She exhaled. We flagged it due to missed payments and the fact the documents don't quite match your usual style. I drove straight home and pulled out every bank statement, every shred of documentation I'd archived. By the time the sun dipped low behind the trees, it'd traced the digital signature used to open the loan application. It was my sister's handwriting. Pixelated, but unmistakable. Bryn. The next morning, I called her and said nothing beyond, let's meet. She agreed. A trendy cafe near downtown Charlotte, her turf, not mine. I showed up 5 minutes early, found a table by the window, and laid the printouts on the table like cards in a losing hand, no longer willing to bluff. She walked in, perfect hair, perfect posture, and zero shame. Damaris, she said, all syrup and spin, you look tired. I'm not tired, I replied evenly. I'm done. She laughed. What is this, some kind of intervention? No, I said, sliding the ledger and screenshot across the table. It's evidence. Her eyes flicked down, then up. That could be anyone's. I already filed. That got her. The corners of her mouth twitched, not quite a frown, not quite a smirk. You're not thinking clearly, she tried. I'm not calling you crazy, I said. I'm calling you a thief. Her tone shifted. Sister, more spin doctor. You're being dramatic. I leaned in. You used my number, you signed my name, you buried my voice, but I'm still here. For once, she didn't have a comeback. Just silence and the sound of her nails tapping the table. I'm not here to ask you to make it right, I said. I'm here to tell you what happens next. And then I left. Back at the farmhouse, the chill in the walls didn't bite like it used to. I lit a fire, rolled up my sleeves, and walked the property, jotting notes for the upcoming inspection. Cracks in the foundation, warped beams, rotting wood but fixable. Everything was. Inside, I sat at the kitchen counter and read Grandma's letter aloud, like scripture. Her voice didn't echo, but it lingered. By the time I finished, the sun had set, and the only light came from the fireplace. I stepped outside with a hammer and a new nameplate I'd picked up at the local hardware store. Nailed it right onto the wooden gate. The metal was cold under my fingers, but the engraving was bold. Home. The morning the letter arrived, I was staining the porch steps, brush in hand, fingers aching from the cold. The sun had barely lifted past the tree line when the mail truck pulled up, and the driver handed me a thick envelope stamped with legal insignia. I didn't open it right away. Something in my bones already knew. Back inside, I set the envelope on the kitchen counter beside a cracked mug and yesterday's grocery receipt. The farmhouse was quiet, too quiet, but it held space for the silence to stretch without choking me. When I finally tore open the flap, my stomach turned before my eyes even found the words. Petition for conservatorship, filed by my mother. Grounds: emotional instability, irrational financial behavior, history of familial detachment. They weren't trying to humiliate me anymore. They were trying to legally erase me. I stood there, unmoving, until the wind pushed against the window like a nudge from the past. All that fire I thought I'd burned, up suddenly, it roared back. By noon, I was in Avery's office. She was a sharp-eyed attorney with a habit of circling things 3 times when she got angry, and she circled my mother's name so hard the pen tore the paper. She wants full guardianship, Avery said. Control of your finances, your property, even your medical decisions. I didn't flinch. I reached into my coat pocket and slid over a folder I'd prepared 2 days ago. Inside were notarized deeds, my clean psychiatric evaluation, bank records showing my investment in the farmhouse, and copies of the forged loan tied back to Bryn. This isn't a breakdown, I said. It's a build. Avery looked at me, then smiled, not kindly, but like someone spotting a chess move 5 plays ahead. Well hit back in 2 directions hard. That evening, as if on cue, the second blow landed. My phone buzzed with a link and the message, "You seeing this?" It was a podcast. A local influencer's show, low budget, high drama. My ex-boyfriend Nathan sat under neon lights, smirking like he'd just remembered something juicy. "Damaris?" he said, chuckling. "Sweet girl, just not all there." She thought her dead grandma left her secret messages in the walls, bought some rundown shack and started calling it her kingdom. Real cult leader energy. The host laughed. Sounds like she went full Grey Gardens. I closed the video. My hand was steady. My breath? Not so much. I walked out onto the porch. The air smelled like damp cedar and bitter ash. I let the cold anchor me. I wanted to scream. Instead, I turned on the outdoor light and stared at the nameplate I'd nailed up just a week ago. Home. They were stacking lies like bricks, trying to build a prison out of whispers. The next day, I showed up at the county courthouse in jeans and a navy blazer that still smelled like mothballs. Avery was already waiting, briefcase in hand. In the hearing room, my mother sat straight-backed, Bryn beside her, legs crossed at the ankle like she was at a garden luncheon. They didn't acknowledge me. Not a nod, not a glance. The judge reviewed the petition aloud. I listened in silence, not because I didn't have words, but because mine would come last, and they'd carry more weight. When he turned to me and asked if I wanted to speak, I said no, I'd rather show. I passed the folder to the clerk. Inside, the psychiatric evaluation, proof of financial management, and every lie they'd told dissected and annotated. The judge leafed through it, expression unreadable. "Well, need time to review," he said, postponing any ruling until then. Outside, I didn't say a word, just walked past them like they weren't there. Back home that night, I lit a fire and watched the flames gnaw at the kindling. The farmhouse creaked, but not from age, from settling, from holding. I opened my laptop, leaned into the glow, and hit record. "I've been called a lot of things," I said. "Daughter, liar, crazy. But they forgot to call me what I really am awake." I paused, then added, "Being underestimated isn't a curse, it's a delay, and I'm right on time." I saved the file, closed the laptop, and stared into the dark beyond my porch, because I knew what was coming next. The next day, I packed a manila envelope and laid out my clothes with more care than I wanted to admit. A pale gray blouse, slacks with clean lines, hair tied low, not flashy, not loud, just undeniable. I didn't go there to stir drama, I went there to end it. The country club sat on a manicured hill, smug as ever. I parked just out of sight, slipped the envelope into my bag, and walked through the entrance like I belonged because I did. The hostess barely glanced at me before waving me through. Inside, laughter spilled from the brunch hall. A jazz trio played by the windows, the air thick with perfume and politeness. Bryn was already in her element, champagne in one hand, fake humility in the other, posing for pictures next to a banner that read, "Empower Her Initiative, Generational Healing Through Giving." I bit the inside of my cheek. Most of the guests hadn't noticed me yet, but those who had. Their eyes flicked to Bryn, then back to me, unsure whether to say something or step aside. I didn't wait. I walked up to the main table where my mother and Bryn sat surrounded by flattery and flutes of mimosa. Neither noticed me right away, not until I set the envelope down in front of them. Bryn blinked, confused. "What's this?" I didn't answer. I just stepped back and folded my hands in front of me, letting the weight of the room shift. She opened it. I watched as her eyes traced the pages slow at first, then faster. The deed with my name on it, bank records, cease and desist language she'd have to Google later, and at the bottom, in bold, the legal complaint for misappropriation of assets and defamation. My mother leaned in, reading over her shoulder. Her face, usually pulled tight like a purse string, slackened. Around them, the room went still. Guests whispered. One man, I recognized him from a childhood Christmas card list, nudged his wife and tilted his phone for a better angle. Bryn's hand fluttered to her chest, as if her pearls could shield her. "This is ridiculous," she said too loudly, forcing a laugh. "She's just bitter making up stories again. We've always tried to help her. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to." The TV near the buffet flickered on a talk show in progress, and then suddenly there I was. They'd edited it beautifully. The creaking floorboards of the farmhouse, time-lapse shots of the renovation, clips of me speaking with quiet honesty. The host's voiceover wrapped it all. Damaris Hall, turning a forgotten inheritance into a movement proof that sometimes ruin is just the beginning. In the segment, I stood in front of the farmhouse gate, the new nameplate behind me. They said I was unstable, but maybe I just stopped being small enough for their comfort. The room didn't breathe. My mother stood, not in protest, but in panic. Her hands hovered midair, unsure whether to snatch the papers, reach for me, or disappear. Bryn's laugh cracked this time, brittle. "She's manipulating the media. That's all this is." She always wanted attention. I turned and walked away. Down the corridor, past the gift table, past the charity pledge sign-up sheet with my name nowhere in sight, through the double doors. I didn't need to run. I'd already arrived. On the front steps, a little girl in a lemon-colored dress tugged her dad's sleeve and pointed at me. "Daddy, is that the lady from the TV?" He looked embarrassed, but I knelt beside her and smiled. "Are you famous?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, sweetheart, just finally seen." Behind me, the party buzzed again, but different now, thinner, like something had been pulled out from underneath, and the whole thing wobbled. In my car, I placed the empty envelope in the glove compartment and started the engine. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel triumphant. I felt free, and that was enough. The courthouse was cold that morning, but not in a cruel way. just still like it had been holding its breath with me. I sat at the long wooden bench beside my attorney, dressed in navy slacks and a crisp button-down shirt that I hadn't worn since my last office job. It didn't fit perfectly any more tight in the shoulders, but I didn't fidget. I just watched the door until the judge walked in and everything around me blurred into silence. It didn't take long. The facts had already been filed, the testimony recorded. My psychiatric evaluation was clear. My deed was authentic, and the financial trail couldn't be argued with. So when the gavel came down and I heard the words, "Legal ownership confirmed. Guardianship petition dismissed," I didn't react with tears. I didn't even look toward my mother or Bryn. I exhaled. Outside, reporters waited, but I kept walking, past their mics, past the headlines, because this wasn't for them. A week later, I stood beside a small podium as city workers lowered a new bronze sign into the earth near my gate. I watched them bolted into place, the sun gleaming off each letter, Cedar Creek Women's Heritage House. The press release had already gone out. Artifacts found beneath the land during restoration had tied the site to early black settlements, long erased from maps but never from memory. An archaeologist from the university said softly, "You didn't just save a house, you saved history." Bryn had tried to sell the land to a developer for a parking lot. Now it would become a museum and transitional home for women rebuilding their lives after financial abuse. Women who, like me, knew what it felt like to be pushed out of their own story. I didn't smile, but I stood taller. The open letter I posted the following Sunday wasn't planned. I'd started typing just to get the words out, what it meant to be called unstable when you're simply tired of being used, what it felt like to hand over your trust and be handed a knife in return. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. The words stood on their own. It was reshared over 2 million times. Therapists quoted it. Survivors tagged their friends. One woman wrote, "I felt crazy until I read this." Another, "I didn't break. I redesigned myself." I hadn't expected the phrase to spread, but there it was on posters, on mugs, on protest signs. People who'd never heard my name now carried pieces of my story on their chest. I didn't want fame. I wanted meaning. And meaning showed up in ways I never saw coming. On the day of the center's ribbon cutting, the sky was soft and blue. No thunder, no drama, just light. Volunteers bustled about, stringing lights along the porch railing, setting out folding chairs. I walked the perimeter with a clipboard in hand, a half host, half janitor, and fully proud. A woman I hadn't seen in years showed up just before the ceremony began. Her name was Lila. We'd worked together in my old job. She had believed the posts, the rumors, had distanced herself. But now she stood before me, holding a bouquet of tulips and a volunteer application. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. I hugged her anyway. My mother didn't attend. Bryn didn't either. No one from that side sent a card, a call, a whisper of regret. And for once, I didn't feel the hollow space where their apologies should be. I felt the weight of all the women beside me, the ones who had stayed, the ones who had fought, the ones who had never needed me to be small in order to feel tall. I gave my speech beneath the porch light, with my grandmother's photo in a silver frame beside the mic. "I didn't save this house," I said. "It saved me. And now, maybe, it can do that for someone else." Later that night, after everyone had gone, I stood by the gate. The wind was gentle. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. I traced my fingers over the word carved in the wood again. Home. It didn't feel like a destination anymore. It felt like something had become. Before we wrap up this story, let me speak to you, not just as Damaris, but as someone who has lived through the fire and made it out with calloused hands and a clear heart. If there's anything this journey taught me, it's this. Sometimes, the people who claim to love you will try to rewrite your story, erase your voice, question your worth, mock your growth. But you are not obligated to stay in places that make you feel small just because you started there. Your silence is not proof of guilt. Your boundaries are not disrespect. And healing is not weakness, it's a revolution, one quiet choice at a time. I know what it's like to be called crazy for standing up, to be gaslit, dismissed, and betrayed by your own. But I also know this. Truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stand. So if you're listening right now and you've been made to feel like your pain was your fault, I see you. And I promise there's a version of your life that doesn't require you to keep shrinking to fit in. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been made to feel like you were the problem just for wanting peace or justice? Or maybe you've walked away from a toxic family dynamic and started over. What helped you hold your ground? Let's talk in the comments. And hey, if this story touched your heart even just a little, drop a 1 in the comments so I know you're with me. Or better yet, tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far these stories are reaching. And if you didn't vibe with this one, that's okay too. Let me know why. I read every comment, and this space is for all of us. If you want more real, raw, and redemptive stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your voice, your presence, and your growth matter here. I'll see you in the next one. Stay brave.